Hi, welcome to Channel Squared, where we connect with you, the divine, and channel here with you live. I'm Heather Marie, founder of Soulgate.
And I'm Jody Lynn Craven, founder of Abundance Consciousness. And today we're talking about boundaries, saying no, settling your nervous system, and grounding. Oh my gosh, Heather, this is such a big topic.
It really is a big topic because there's a lot packed into that.
Yeah. Okay, so where should we start with this one?
Let's start with saying no. When you think about boundaries, we think about where we draw the line in the sand, right?
Mm-hmm.
At what point does somebody, cross this invisible line, whether they know it's there or they don't know that it's there? But really, it is there. It's just to what degree and where exactly is it located?
Mm-hmm.
And, everybody has boundaries. So when someone says, oh, you don't have any boundaries, no, they do have boundaries. They just have to really get backed into a corner in order to have that line be visible.
Yeah. Or the boundary is always crossed over and over and over again, and they don't realize it, or I don't realize until I'm in a point where I'm frustrated, I'm irritated by said person, or I feel gross because I haven't set with myself and or communicated with other people that, hey, this is a boundary for me, this is my line.
Exactly. And when boundaries get crossed, they get crossed because you don't respect your own boundaries. You don't say no. So many times I hear people talking about, oh, you just have to say no, just say no more often, but they're not actually saying who you're saying no to.
Yeah.
And most of the time I'm saying no to me in the sense of here is my line in the sand.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't respect your own boundaries, how's somebody else going to respect them?
Right. And it's almost it is an energetic thing. I found when I started setting boundaries for myself, people started not crossing those said boundaries. And I had never actually communicated it out loud with these individuals. But I find, for me anyway, one of the biggest things, or the hardest things that I've struggled with, and I've been working on this a lot lately, is actually saying no. I found there was a really recent example of this where somebody was asking me to go to an event or go and do something. And I was like, yeah, well, I'll check my schedule and I'll get back to you. And then I found myself frustrated when they followed up with me like, hey, are you coming? Like, oh God, don't really want to go. And then I would give another vague response like, yeah, I don't think it's looking good. I don't know. And they'd be like, okay, well, I'll follow up with you later. And then said person would follow up and I'd be like, oh God. But what I realized in witnessing this without judgment for myself is that I never actually said no. And what if I was to just say no? Like, basically in my mind, the vision that I was getting was that I was leaving the door open for them to keep coming back and trying to convince me. It was me that was doing that, not them opening the door. Hello, are you home? It was me leaving the door open for them to enter over and over and over again. And I was causing my own frustration. If I would have just simply said, that doesn't feel good to me, no, I won't be able to make it, the interaction could have been completely different. But I want to put an asterisk on that and come back to it after whatever you have to add, Heather.
No, I mean, I 100% agree, 100% agree. And how many times have we all done that where we're like, well, let me get back to you on that. Let me check my schedule. That's one that I use personally. If I'm not ready to commit yes or no, I'm like, oh, let me check my schedule and get back to you, knowing darn good and well that I could check my schedule right now. Mostly it's I need time to feel into whether or not I'm up for it.
Yeah.
And maybe it is also that I might want to, but it's not enthusiastically yes. And there may be something else that comes along that I want to do instead.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is an important distinction, is deciding, is it not a hell yes, I'm totally down for doing this, because you're waiting for a different opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Or you don't really know why, like what you're feeling, I guess. And that's actually an episode coming up. It's how you feel your feelings in the next few weeks. But for me, I always ask that question when I'm not like a F yes, like, yes, I'm 100% committed. This sounds awesome. I will be there come, hell or high water. It's happening. If I don't have that response and I don't have the opposite response, like, heck no, I am not going. I'm somewhere in the middle. That's one of the first questions I ask myself is like, okay, how do I feel about going? Meh, kind of want to go, kind of don't want to go. And this scenario that I was talking about where I didn't say no, I was on the fence. And I had to ask myself a lot of questions. Why do you want to go? Well, it'd be kind of nice to go. Why? And I challenge myself on the reasons from a place of love and compassion and understanding, because I'm trying to get to know myself at a deeper capacity, have a more conscious experience in this lifetime. So we have to ask these questions, or I think we have to ask these questions. So I kind of would like to go, why? Well, I'd really like to talk to this person or that person. It would be nice. These were my reasons. It'd be nice to see some of these people. Okay. It would be nice to see some of these people. What are the reasons why you don't really feel called to going? Well, typically this environment is super competitive or kind of brings out a side of me that I don't really like. And, it's a trigger point for me. And sometimes there's a lot of superficial conversations like, how are you? Good. How are you? Great. Like it's just a surface level that I don't want to live my life on the surface. We were talking about plastic happy last week. I don't want to live my life anymore like that, because that's how I was. So if I don't want to live my life like that anymore, then I have to curb or completely stop, some of the experiences that I was having that were contributing to that plastic happy. So asking myself that question, like, okay, why is it you want to go? Why is it you don't want to go? And in this question period for this specific example, a lot of what was driving my yes was old patterns and belief systems, like you should show up and you should be a part of this. And, all of these beliefs that I held from before that started to kind of rear their face again, saying, well, it's a good thing to, go and whatever. And I was really stuck in this decision specifically. And then all of a sudden, somebody else invited me to something else that I was yes, absolutely, I'm going. And it made the decision for me. Yep, can't go to that because I'm going to this. And it was easy. So asking those questions is vital about why you do or do not want to go, and being kind to yourself, because it might be that a program that you had from before that you've worked on or that you're completely unconscious of is driving you to want to be a part of that. And it might not be the reality that you're trying to achieve or the reality that you're desiring to create in this moment.
Well, I think too, like when we're talking about this particular example, this is just one of many examples that we can use about like boundaries and trying to understand like why you have them or why you don't have them. I think that there are other instances where you don't have a boundary in place because maybe you haven't had the experience before. And so you kind of get hit with this experience and you're like, oh man, that's like totally, what do I do with that? For example, if you are in maybe a difficult romantic partnership, there's a lot of boundaries that get crossed in romantic partnership. And when those boundaries aren't communicated up front, it can really create a lot of problems.
Mhm.
And so many times I'll see women and men who will be afraid to talk about their boundaries. They'll be afraid to talk about their deal breakers. They'll be afraid to talk about this stuff until they're too far into the relationship, when boundaries have been crossed, deals have been broken, and now they're trying to take their shambles of a relationship and put it back together.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that we're having a conversation about boundaries, about having healthy boundaries, excuse me, not just in relationships, but for yourself too. And I think that this is an important topic for anyone who's listening to take a minute, pause right here, and think about what your boundaries actually look like.
Mhm.
Where are they? And what do they apply to? What instances?
Mhm. Yeah, because I mean, a boundary for contact, for example, could be completely different for, well, should be or would be completely different for somebody that you work with or a work capacity versus a friend or your partner.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't, if you were in a working relationship, you wouldn't allow a colleague to talk to you in a certain way that maybe you would allow your partner to talk to you in, or that would let your partner off the hook if they spoke to you in that tone or using that type of language. So, you know, it can be a slippery slope. But I think that, having healthy boundaries and knowing where your limits are, you know, before you have someone crossing over them, gives you a chance to warn them that they're encroaching on a boundary.
Yeah.
One of the important conversations that Quinn and I had before we got married, in fact, we had this conversation, I don't know, it was like within our first 3 dates, might have even been our first date. We talked about children. And this is a very important conversation to have early on, because I did not want there to be any confusion, and I wanted to understand what his deal breaker or boundary is when it comes to having a family. Some men don't want to have families at all. Some men are very passionate about families, and Quinn's on the passionate side of having a family. And, going into our relationship, knowing that I was so much older than him, we needed to have a frank conversation about it. Do you want to have children? And he says, yep, definitely. I absolutely want to have children. And he says, what about you? And I said, yeah, I want to have children. I said, but I'm older, and, it may not be in the cards for me anymore. And he says, well, you not wanting to have children is a deal breaker. You not being able to have children is something entirely different.
Mhm. What a hard
So
conversation to have on your first date.
totally. But you know what? It was the perfect time to have it, because we weren't invested emotionally in the relationship at that point. Right.
Mhm.
So if it would have been like, nope, not having kids, he would have been like, all right, peace out. It was good having this dinner with you. Toodly do. Catch you
Yeah.
on the flip side. Right.
Yeah.
And I would have moved on about my life, and that would have been that, instead of waiting, until after we're married to have the conversation,
Mhm.
you know?
Such an important conversation before that huge commitment. And
And that was a boundary for him, right?
yeah.
That was a boundary. He was like, this is my boundary. If you tell me right now that you don't want to have kids, we are done.
Mhm.
That is a chop your head off boundary.
Yes.
And how beautiful to be able to know where that was.
Mhm. And it's funny because I think sometimes we, as I can't speak for men, so I'm going to say women. So sometimes as women, we don't take the things that our partners or people around us are taking as solid or as gold, essentially, like, oh, they'll change their mind, or that'll be different, or even things that we have a boundary on ourselves, whatever that may be. Oh, well, it's not that bad. Or we try and rationalize that can change. You know, my very first like serious relationship, there was a lot of red flag issues. And one of them was some illegal drugs. And I was like, well, it's not that bad. He doesn't do it all the time. And money was a huge factor. He was, well, probably because of the first thing that I said, but he never had any money ever. And, you know, I was paying more and more and more, and I made way less than him. But because I had walked over those boundaries myself and I didn't have the courage to stand up for what I truly wanted, I found myself very quickly in a situation where I was paying, you know, more than half of the bills. I was also, you know, sacrificing extra money so that, you know, our neighbors, which were his parents at the time, could come over and shower and get ready at our house because they had an accident at their house and couldn't use their bathroom or whatever. But fast forward a month into this, you know, my bills have all quadrupled because there's, you know, 3 or 4 of them and there was 2 of us, and they're in my house all the time, you know, like all of these things. Like they even took our forks once. Like what? Like no boundary whatsoever. And I stayed in that environment. I chose not to say anything for a really long time until I blew like a top, which is not, obviously at that point, we did not have a constructive conversation about it. I remember the day that our forks were gone. It was madness. Like it just, I put myself in that situation. I can take responsibility for that. And I learned, okay, I need to talk about these things up front. You know, if you're going to move right beside your future in-laws, then there has to be some sort of boundary. There has to be some sort of conversation of like, is their house your house and vice versa? And like, can they steal your forks one random Saturday night? Are you okay with that?
Right, exactly. And sometimes those boundaries don't come up until you're kind of in the moment. You know, I mean, you didn't know that you had a boundary about your silverware being stolen until your silverware was stolen. And then you were like, what the hell, man? You know?
Yeah. And I mean, you know what? It's not, take my silverware. That's fine. You're having a party. You need some extra setups. Great. Amazing. Whatever. Just let me know. Communicate. And then wash them and bring them back.
Right.
That would have been my boundary, but I didn't have the courage at that time to say it before because I didn't know what was going on, or say it after.
And you bring up a really important thing, and that is courage. You know, you didn't have the courage then to do it. And it does require a certain amount of courage to enforce your boundaries. But you have to find that. You have to enforce your boundaries because people will treat you how you allow them to. You know, and if they can, you know, get away with the minimal effort, they will, because that's just sort of the way that many in society are. Not saying all, there are some lovely people that are not like that, but
we're all built differently. Like we all come from different families that had different rules growing up and different standards and different customs and everything like that. So what might be normal for, you know, my husband or me or whatever might not be normal for vice versa. And it was never a thought or a question. So it's not from a place of malice all the time. It could be just, that's been my experience and I'm totally okay with that. That's fine with me. I never thought it would be a big deal.
Right. Right.
Absolutely.
So, okay. So part of the things that come up when you've had a boundary crossed is there becomes an inflammation typically, right? You maybe you didn't even know you had a boundary there. They've now stepped over the line, upset you. You're upset. You're inflamed. They're inflamed because you're inflamed. So what do you do? Like, how do you like settle your nervous system? How do you ground into this? Like, how do you evolve from this, F you, dude, you totally crossed the line status.
From my personal perspective and some of the teachings that I teach on, I start with me first, because I am the common denominator in my life. You are the common denominator in your life. I can control me. I can't control the rest of the world, but I can control me. So the first thing that I would do is regulate my nervous system. And there's a bunch of different ways that you can calm the nervous system, because often it's just a nervous system response. So it's I'm being chased by a tiger. I need to run, or I need to fight, or I need to freeze. The fight, flight, freeze, whatever mode that you go into. And from that space, when you look at like the physiology of going through that limbic response, your brain is turning off. The conscious side of the brain that makes rational, logical decisions switched off. Blood now switches from the extremities and focuses on the core part of your body. It gets pumping. Think of like if you were freezing out in Alaska or something, like your fingertips are going to get frozen, and, all the blood is rushing to this middle part here. So you can't operate from a conscious perspective while in this fear response. So you need to stop that first. And there's some really simple ways. Go outside. If you have grass, put your feet on the grass and just breathe. Breathe until your heart rate normalizes, till you have that, erratic, irrational thoughts like going crazy, that subsides. Just keep breathing. You can do this with a tree. You can just hug a tree or touch a tree. That will help. If you can't go outside because you live in Canada or something like that, and there's snow on the ground and it's too cold for that, you can simply put your forehead on something solid, your desk, the floor, whatever, a table, something solid.
Gently.
You're not banging your head on the desk. You just rest your forehead on the desk and breathe through the response. Give yourself the time to allow the emotions to move through you, because another thing that people will often do is either explode on their partner or have this explosive reaction, or suppress. They're going to try and suppress their feelings. And that's just going to cause dis-ease within the body. So you got to get that up and out. So allow yourself to just breathe through it. When I first started doing this, my assistant, because I would do it in my office, and I would have this because I was so wired to be in this fight, flight, freeze response. And mine was flight. Like I'm running. And I'm not really that fast of a runner. So, but I just, picture me, big cartoon head, big hair, just hair on fire. Ah! That's what I picture. That's how I would respond. And I was in this response like several times a day. The littlest thing would trigger me. So I would do this all the time, is lay my head down on the desk and I would just breathe until I felt my body normalize. And my assistant thought I was a little crazy for a while there. She's like, what are you doing? Sleeping? No. I'm just normalizing my, my nervous system. Okie dokie. And when I first started, it was, 5 minutes, 6 minutes. If it was something really big that I was working through or trying to calm down from, or something I was really afraid of, it would take a lot longer. But the more that I practiced this, the shorter the time became in terms of when the response started and I caught it, and the time that I got out of it. So within like 30 seconds to a minute now, I can restabilize my entire nervous system and come back to this state of calm most of the time. I put an asterisk on everything because I'm human. So, so I'd start there.
I think that that's a really interesting, like good way to do that. I have a different process.
Cool.
Surprisingly. I definitely get like the breathing, the relaxing, like just like calm yourself that way. For me, sometimes when I do like a breathing exercise like that, it brings me too much into my body, and my body is the thing having the reaction. And so I will like hum, like in my head, like I'll instantly bring my awareness up to my head and I'll be like, la la la, right? Like this is like what I do. So like if I am like completely like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna just stab you right now, I will be like, la 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 la, like in my head, and I'll just keep doing that over and over and over again until I get all the little, irritants to like settle. And at that point, then I'm like, okay, now I can breathe.
Now I can breathe.
And now I can deal with this situation, right? But it's almost like I need to like
get out of it
my
first.
brain back into like functioning. And the
Yep.
only way to do that is to like bring my awareness up and then be like, sing a little song in my head, make a noise, whatever in my head, so that I can like stop that almost like hijack where I'm like, wow, did that just happen? Give me a knife so I can stab you right now.
I'm gonna stab
I'm like,
you. Yeah.
exactly. So once I realize I'm reaching for the knife, I immediately go to my head and I'm like, and just get it. Okay, we're good.
Yeah.
Now I can breathe.
Yeah.
Now I'm coming down. Now I'm putting the knife down. Yes. Yeah.
So from there, I don't know what your next step is. I know for me, then I start asking myself some questions. Why are you so mad being the first? What upset you? And I let my brain go. I used to do this in a journal because I've been doing this for a long time. I can get through it in my own head. I don't need to, I don't need to write it all out. But before, I used to need to track everything, like see where it was going, almost like going through the rabbit hole or something. So I asked the question of like, why am I so mad? What made you so mad that they said, that they did, or whatever, and why? Because sometimes it has nothing to do with them. A lot of times for me, it has nothing to do with them and everything to do with me. And a lot of times it comes back to a lack of communication. Again, I didn't say this was my boundary, or I'm assuming that their expectation or their boundary is this, but I'm assuming that information. So it's a bunch of stuff I've made up in my own head that's driving me crazy or causing this response. And then from there, if I need to, if it's with someone else, I can ask some questions. And I talk about doing this with Nate all the time. We were talking about, I was overwhelmed. This was a couple summers ago, and I felt like I had all this stuff to do. And I felt like I was a bad wife because I wasn't on top of the laundry and on top of the dishes and on top of the cooking. And I was really overwhelmed. And then he said something and I got so mad. And so I calmed myself down. And then I was like, why are you so mad? Like, why are you so angry right now? Well, he expects me to be, this housewife and all of these things and blah, blah, blah. Like I just ran with it, like in my journal, trying to get it all out. Oh, okay. He expects me to do all of these things. And if I don't, then I'm a bad wife and he's going to hate me and then he's going to leave me and all of these things. All of that was bundled into that conversation. And what I realized was there was that word expectation. And in my mind, I realized from a conscious perspective, I've never asked him what his expectation was for our home. We never actually had that conversation about those boundaries. It's always just kind of flowed. And this was kind of the first time that I was running up against it. And so then I did the courageous thing and I asked him, what is your expectation? And he said, nothing. We're a team. So you pick up where I fall down and vice versa. And we just go with the flow of things. If you need more help, you tell me. If I need more help, I tell you. Oh, okay.
Isn't that amazing? And that is the beautiful thing about that courageous moment of having that conversation. You may just be surprised at the answer that you get, the response that you get. But if you don't ask the questions, then you don't know. And this isn't just for your relationships or your partnerships or your working relationships. This is for you too.
Yeah.
When, as you were talking, I was thinking about, wow, that's so interesting because, we've had, similar instances where, I get all worked up because I think I'm being a horrible wife because I'm not doing enough. I'm not producing enough. I'm not bringing enough money. I'm not cooking enough. I'm not cleaning enough, I think that for women, we tend to have been sort of stereotyped into that role. God bless our mothers and grandmothers and great grandmothers and everything that they did. They're freaking rock stars.
Yeah.
Somehow they managed to get all the shit done. But it's not like that anymore. We're all inundated. Women, men, who knows what your sexual orientation is. Everyone is so overwhelmed with just living at this point, the bombardment of information and, everyone's emotions are on edge and, we're transitioning into this new, paradigm. And so there's just a lot going on. And how wonderful it would be to have these conversations with the people in your life about what is important to you. And am I really doing a bad job that I'm telling myself that I'm doing? Quinn and I have these kinds of conversations all the time because I get really worked up about not being a performer like I've been historically. I've always made a lot of money. I've always been very successful. I've always kept a very clean house, whether it be me cleaning it, a housekeeper cleaning it, it was always clean, and stuff was always getting done. And I just kind of went along behind anybody in my life and just sort of swept it, fixed it, right? And now I'm in a role that's completely different from that, complete 180 from that. And it has me on edge sometimes, and it makes me feel bad when I hear him stacking the dishwasher. I'm like, oh my God, I should totally be doing that right now. He's had this really busy, crazy week and he's out there loading the dishwasher, but when I ask him, he's like, what? I'm just taking care of it. It's no big deal. Don't get upset about it.
Yeah. I think we overanalyze things way more than men do. And, if you're a man watching this, you can comment and let us know. But I find that all the time, exactly what you're saying. Like I get caught up in my head, and that's where that frustration came from. And then also I start to see where I fall down, where I need help too. Like I will make the majority of the meals in our household. And when I'm busy, I don't feel I have the capacity to do that and make lunches and whatever. And I have to, have that conversation with Nate. Like, I really need help this week, or I really need help on this day. He needs like specifics. Can you make dinner Wednesday? And like put it on the calendar. And that's again, going back to boundaries. It's just a conversation about what you need to fulfill the role that you're taking on at this time, and what would make it better.
Totally. And, I just want to highlight that this boundary that you're talking about, can you make dinner on Wednesday night? This is a boundary for you, not a boundary for him. You're not creating a boundary for him. Like, don't cross this line, buddy, or you're going to get it. Or you better make dinner or you're going to get it. Right.
Or else,
this is not that. The boundary that you're putting into place is I need support.
Yeah.
And I care about myself and I love me and I love us enough to create a structure because I can't do it on Wednesday. So you're having this boundary relationship with yourself in order to ask for the help. And I think that gets confused a lot. When we first started this conversation, this was kind of how I opened this conversation was, the boundaries are not always for other people. The boundaries are for you. What do you need in order to function well, to feel happy, to experience life the way that you need? This has nothing, very little actually, to do about them. And everything to do with you.
Yes.
So
absolutely. Yeah. And we get that so twisted in our mind. I know for me, saying no to somebody that I had never said no to, or traditionally hadn't said no to before, the first time was really hard. And, when you say no, or you set a boundary or whatever, sometimes there's this feeling of like this fear of missing out. Oh, well, if I don't go or I don't say yes, they're never going to ask me again. And it's coming from this place of lack or of fear. And it's not reality. It's this false reality that you're creating, because I bet if somebody invites you to a party and you say no, if you were to ask them, Heather, you invited me to this party and I can't come, no explanation, but I can't come. Does that mean you'll never invite me to another party again? You would say,
no, don't be ridiculous.
are you kidding? Like, it's just a party. But we build these things
Right.
up in our own mind. And one thing, I know we're running out of time, but one thing that was really stood out to me in this conversation, and a reason why I forever didn't draw boundaries or say no, is because I felt like I had to justify my answer. That no, period, was not a complete statement or was not a complete sentence. And I remember there's someone super close to me who I had never really said no to, work with them, whatever, really great person. But I was a good student, I was trained by them, and so I would just follow along. I was very coachable. I did everything that, the leadership in my company told me to do. And I was very good at it. Anyway, fast forward to me making my own way in life and carving out my own path and going in the direction of what feels best for me. The first time that I said no to going to an event, I said I had worked up the courage and then convinced myself that I didn't need a justification. Because I didn't need a justification. I don't have to justify myself for saying no. I don't want to. Like, period. Like, no is the answer. And I remember I said, no, thank you. I cannot make it. And this person came back to me and said, okay, well, let's just talk about it tomorrow. And I got so mad, so incredibly mad, because I knew that they just wanted to convince me to do what they wanted me to do. And I was pretty firm on my decision. And I was able to stand in my own authority to make that decision. And I was going to stand in that decision. It was what was right for me at that point in time. And I said, no conversation needed. And they came back with, no, we'll just talk about it and, whatever. And I, at that point, didn't have a lot of finesse, we'll say. I was learning to say no, and you're going to fall down when you start. And sure. I was like, no, you just want to talk to me because you want to try and convince me. So if you want to try and convince me to change my mind, we don't need to have a conversation. If you want to call me because you actually want to talk to me, great, but we will not be talking about this anymore. I've already said no. That was effective. I was kind of an asshole, but it's what I needed.
Yeah.
To declare. And I didn't know. I mean, now I would handle it a little bit differently because I have more grace for their position, for the people that are in my life, for myself. And I'm a little bit more tactful than, 5 years ago. But it's the best that I could do. And I needed to stand in that boundary and stand on my own 2 feet with the decision. And I knew that if that person called me, that I would waver because I didn't have the justification that was good enough for them. And I knew that they would try and twist me into being like, oh, well, I'll think about it. And I didn't want that. I had made a decision and I was going to stand by it. So as you're learning to say no, and you're trying out different things, you're going to run up to some situations where, maybe you lose your cool a little bit in setting that boundary, or you're not as good at communicating. And, in those moments, give yourself grace and learn how to be better at communicating what it is that you need and what it is that you desire. at that point in time, I set such a strong boundary. No means no. That since that point, 5 years ago or however long it was, this individual will ask me to include me, and I appreciate being included. Like, thank you so much for asking me. And when I say no, he doesn't push me. He just says, okay, thank you. If you change your mind, let me know, which is fine.
And I think that that is amazing. I want to add something to that, if I may.
Mm.
If you are the one doing the inviting and you're getting the no, it doesn't mean to stop inviting.
Right.
Because, and this happens to me a lot. This is something that is like an occurring theme in my life where, I'm very protective of my energy. And when I am not up for something, I do not want to do it. Like I just, the way that I'm built, I need my time to myself.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's like water, like breathing to me. I have to have my time and my space. And if I, because of the way that I'm built, I just need time to replenish and rejuvenate. And that time needs to be spent alone. And I sometimes do not have the energy that is required for me to put on the show, be the smiling face, show up in all this glory to have a good rip-roaring good time, right? Like sometimes I just don't have the bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a lot of no's that I say in my life. And sometimes I'm just like, oh God, I need to go because I've said no like 3 or 4 times now. And, they're going to stop inviting me if I don't go. And, but I've had a few instances in my life where the things that they want to do are not things that I'm up for. I just don't want to. And it's not going to make me feel good. And the entire time that I'm there, I'm going to be looking for my escape route. Like, how long do I have to be here until I can leave? Right. And that's
What's
a
socially
shitty.
acceptable.
Exactly. Like if I'm here for an hour, is that long enough? Like, okay, if I have a cocktail with them, will that be long enough? And I'm constantly thinking about, okay, is it time? Is it time? Is it time? Can I go now? Can I go now? Because I'm just so uncomfortable in that particular environment. And so, oftentimes I will not be invited anymore. Like if I say no more than twice, on the third no, I usually just get blacklisted from being invited ever again. And so then I'll hear that things are going on and, I'll be like, oh, that would have been kind of fun. I wish I was invited to that, but I will not invite myself to anything either.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to say that while you're saying no, if you are on the other side and you're the recipient of the no, don't stop asking the no giver just because they said no. Because they have their reasons for saying no.
Yeah.
And it could be that it's just the activity that you keep inviting them to is not the activity that they wish to participate in, but the other activity number 4, could be exactly the activity that they want to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I have to say about that.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And maybe as the person saying no, if you're open to future things, whether it's like that or something different or whatever, I'm not saying lie. Do not be truthful and honest. Like right now is not a good time for me and I cannot make it, but keep me in mind the next time you do something like that, or the next time you guys get together. And that, extends that olive branch back to them saying, I'm not closed off forever. I'm just closed off for this specific instance.
Yeah. And that's a great way to communicate it. It's funny. I'm thinking of a particular incident because I know we're getting short on time. So I got to hurry up and say it. But I have a friend who she always was inviting us to come over and hang out in her pool. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty shy. I don't know her very well. I know her well. She doesn't know me as well as I know her because of our previous relationship. right? And so, I know so much about her life. It's really crazy, but she doesn't really know that much about me, like
So you were her
like the
teacher.
me of me. Huh?
You were her teacher at some point, I assume.
She was a client.
Yeah.
And so, so I know a lot about her. She doesn't know as much about me. And I'm pretty shy, especially when it comes to like how I dress, putting on a bathing suit is like, I might as well be naked. It's just, I'm a very shy girl that way. And you wouldn't know it talking to me, but I really deep down underneath all this layers, I really am just a shy girl. And so, going and being in her pool in a bathing suit was like, oh God, I just can't do that. I'm like, I don't have enough clothes to wear in a swimming pool to not look like a total weirdo, And so, and it was always with other people. Like it
Like a
wasn't
bunch of
just
people you didn't know.
a bunch of people I didn't know.
Yeah.
Exactly. She was always having like these pool parties and these pool gatherings. She's always inviting me to the pool with all these people I didn't know. And I'm like, oh, I can't go to that. I just can't go.
Yeah.
If it would
I
have
feel
been
uncomfortable with
just
just
her,
you. Yeah.
yeah, like if it would have been just her, I probably would have gone and I probably would have wearing lots of drapes and slinked into the pool and slinked back into the drapes, right? Because I would have been more comfortable that way. But when there's a bunch of eyeballs instead of just two eyeballs that you can be talking to, making eye contact with, it's better that way, right? And so, but I don't get invited anymore because I said no so many times. But it was always the same event over and over and over again. And so, yeah, just keep asking. And I probably should have just said, don't invite me to the group pool parties. I'll come hang out with you in your pool, just us, but I don't want to be around a bunch of weirdo strangers that I don't know half naked.
And they might not be weirdos. You just
they're
don't
probably
know them.
great people. They're probably like awesome, super cool. And I probably would love them. And after the first time, it probably wouldn't be a thing anymore. But that first time is so painfully uncomfortable that I just can't.
Yeah. Well, and that is a really good reminder, Heather, about vulnerability and honesty. Because if you were to call this person right now and say, listen, I really like the idea of going to a pool party, but I'm super shy and I don't like being in a bathing suit. I feel really uncomfortable. And, so if you have, if you guys are just chilling in the pool, just you and your husband and your kids or, the immediate family or whatever, I would totally be down for something like that. But maybe until I know these other people, I don't really want to get half naked in front of them. And if somebody said that to me, yeah, absolutely. Like, oh my gosh, thanks for sharing. When you share your heart like that and you're honest and open and you're vulnerable about what you're thinking, more often than not, people respond in a loving, kind, and graceful way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there, my friends, is how Heather gets coached by Jody.
And vice versa. Well, I hope you guys are enjoying this conversation. If you are, make sure you hit that like button, send it to 10 of your friends, tell them to subscribe and hit that reminder button so you never miss an episode. Next week, we will be back with Nourish Yourself, healing yourself with nature, the healing impacts of nature, and so much more. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.